The intercom crackled to life, just as Dr. Michael Rourke put his pen down for the third time. "Trauma incoming," the voice said, broken by static but clear enough to quicken his pulse. He glanced around at his team, faces drawn and pale under the bright lights, eyes either bloodshot or barely awake. For a split second, they seemed suspended right before the adrenaline kicked in again. Michael looped his stethoscope around his neck out of habit, jaw set as the ER doors slammed open. A gurney rattled in, fluorescent lights humming overhead. On it was a teenage boy, 17 maybe, jaw slack, hair messy and sticky with blood. The two paramedics moved quickly, sneakers squeaking on the floor. The boy's chest moved in short, frantic bursts. His torn shirt clung to thin ribs, dyed deep red. "Gunshot wound left thorax," one paramedic said, already spitting out numbers and stats. Michael nodded, pausing a beat before his voice came, hoarse but firm. "Get 2 large-bore IVs and oxygen. Trauma panel. Ready the thoracotomy tray. Let's go, people." The room shifted instantly into motion. Gloved hands moved around him. IV lines found veins, and someone kept asking the boy rapid questions. "Josh, can you hear me? Stay with us, Josh." There was no answer except a weak, choking gasp. Michael felt his own breathing tight, the chaos narrowing to the wound under his hands. "Chest tube," he called, fingers working through slick, warm blood. Muscle memory took over. Cut, clamp, then the sound of air rushing out as the tube slid in. Blood frothed up, staining the drapes. The heart monitor beeped wildly, each blip sharper than the last. "Pressure's dropping," a nurse said. Michael was already moving. He glanced up once, just long enough to see the boy's eyelids flutter open, a flash of pain passing through. Then from the hallway, a piercing cry. "A mother!" The sound cut through the trauma room in a way alarms never could. Michael kept working. Hands steady, voice level. Patch, stitch, hold things together. Time blurred into the strange, elastic rhythm emergency medicine creates. Second stretch. Hours disappear. Finally, the boy's breathing eased beneath the oxygen mask. Michael stepped back slowly, sweat running down the side of his face. "He's stable," he said quietly. "Prep for surgery. Page cardio." The tension in the room loosened all at once. Nurses exhaled. Someone laughed weakly. A tray clattered somewhere behind him. At the sink, Michael cleaned his hands, while blood-tinged water spiraled away beneath fluorescent light. The ER buzzed around him. Alarms, voices, the smell of antiseptic. Outside the trauma bay, the boy's mother sobbed openly now. Michael leaned against the sink for a moment longer than necessary. The strange thing about emergency medicine is how quickly the world expects you to move on. A person nearly dies. Then someone asks you about paperwork 5 minutes later. By the time he left the hospital, the sky was deep black and heavy with mist. The parking lot felt abandoned, except for a few sodium lamps glowing through fog. Michael's old Volvo sat near the far curb, streaked with rain and hospital dust. He slid into the driver's seat and shut the door carefully. Silence. No radio. No podcast. No calls. He rested both hands on the steering wheel and stared through the windshield while fog drifted beneath the lamps. Normally, Evelyn texted him at least once during overnight shifts. Nothing dramatic. Just small things. Drive safe. Still awake. You surviving over there. Tonight there had been nothing. He checked his phone again anyway. Still blank. At 3 in the morning, the city looked emotionally exhausted. Traffic lights changed for nobody. Storefronts reflected rain across empty sidewalks. Michael drove slowly through streets he knew too well, shoulders heavy beneath wrinkled scrubs. The deeper exhaustion set in, the more he noticed little things. A couple arguing quietly outside a diner. A delivery driver asleep in his van. A woman smoking beneath an apartment awning while staring at her phone. Everybody looked lonely after midnight. Home waited near the edge of a quiet neighborhood lined with old trees and narrow driveways. The porch light glowed weakly against the fog. Michael sat in the driveway for a moment before getting out. That had become routine lately. A pause between versions of his life. Hospital, home. Somewhere during the last year, the transition stopped feeling smooth. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lavender and burnt candle wax. The dishwasher hummed softly from the kitchen. A wineglass sat beside the sink, half full. He noticed that immediately because Evelyn rarely left unfinished wine behind. Upstairs, the bedroom door glowed faint blue underneath. Michael loosened his shoulders and walked quietly down the hall. Evelyn sat upright in bed, with an iPad balanced against her knees. Her hair was loose, her robe cinched tightly around her waist. The blue light sharpened the tiredness beneath her eyes. She didn't look up right away. "Hey," Michael said carefully. "Didn't mean to wake you." She set the iPad aside and finally turned toward him. "How was it?" Her voice sounded distant. Not cold, not angry, just emotionally somewhere else. Michael sat carefully on the edge of the bed. 17-year-old kid. Shot in the chest. We got him stable. She nodded once. "That's good." That was all. No questions. No follow-up. Once upon a time, Evelyn used to ask everything. How bad was it? Was he scared? Did he make it? Michael used to come home and unload entire nights into her lap, while she listened beside him with coffee warming between both hands. Now conversations ended before they fully started. He pulled his shirt off slowly. "My schedule changes tomorrow," he said. "I'm off this weekend. Maybe we could get away somewhere." Evelyn smoothed the blanket absently across her knees. "Let's see how the week goes." The answer landed flat between them. Outside, wind rattled lightly against the windows. Michael slid beneath the covers carefully, leaving space between them without meaning to. Or maybe meaning to. He wasn't sure anymore. Sleep stayed far away. Above him, shadows drifted slowly across the ceiling. Beside him, Evelyn's breathing remained uneven for nearly an hour before finally settling. Michael stared into darkness, thinking something he hated admitting even privately. The distance between them no longer felt temporary. 3 days later, Michael stood in the hospital cafeteria stirring bad coffee while rain tapped softly against the windows. Residents shuffled through the breakfast line looking half-conscious. A television, mounted near the ceiling, muttered through morning headlines nobody was actually watching. Michael sat alone, near the corner with paperwork spread beside him. He tried reading the same chart 3 separate times. None of it stayed in his head. His phone buzzed once. "Evelyn." For a second, relief moved through him automatically. Then he opened the message. "Lunch with Claire today. Don't wait for dinner." That was it. No heart, no joke, no warmth, just logistics. He stared at the screen longer than necessary. Across the cafeteria, one of the younger nurses laughed at something on her phone. Michael watched her without really seeing her. Then his colleague Aaron dropped into the chair opposite him, carrying scrambled eggs and 2 energy drinks. "You look terrible," Aaron said. "Appreciate that. Seriously, you sleeping at all?" Michael shrugged. Aaron studied him for a second. "Everything okay at home?" The question irritated him instantly. Not because Aaron meant anything by it. Because the answer felt complicated suddenly. "Yeah," Michael said. "Just tired." Aaron nodded slowly in the way people do when they don't fully believe you but decide not to push. That bothered Michael more than it should have. That Friday night, Michael came home earlier than expected. The rain had finally stopped. Cold salt air drifted inland from the coast. The house was dark except for kitchen light. He stepped inside quietly. Voices. Evelyn was on the phone. Laughing. Not polite laughter. Real laughter. The kind he hadn't heard from her in months. Michael stopped in the hallway automatically. Not hiding. Just listening. "No, that's exactly why it was funny," she said. Another laugh. Then quieter. "You're terrible." Michael stood there holding his keys, while something uncomfortable shifted beneath his ribs. When he stepped into the kitchen, Evelyn looked up sharply. Too sharply. "Hey," she said quickly. The laughter disappeared from her face almost immediately. "Hey." She turned slightly away while ending the call. "Who was that?" he asked casually. "Claire." Too fast. Not dramatic. Just immediate. Michael nodded slowly. The kitchen smelled faintly like garlic and wine. A cutting board sat beside the sink. Half-finished salad. 2 wineglasses. He noticed the second one before she quietly moved it toward the sink. You had company. Claire stopped by earlier. Again. Fast answer. Perfect answer. Michael loosened his tie slowly, while watching her rinse glasses beneath warm water. Nothing looked suspicious. That was the problem. Everything looked managed. Over the next 2 weeks, Michael began noticing small things. Not evidence. Patterns. Evelyn guarded her phone more carefully. She took longer evening walks. Conversations shortened strangely whenever he entered rooms. Once at nearly midnight, he walked downstairs for water and found her sitting alone on the back patio wearing headphones. She looked startled when she saw him. Couldn't sleep, she said. The ocean wind pushed softly through the yard behind her. Michael stood beside the sliding door watching her remove the headphones. You okay? Yeah. Again. Too quick. He sat beside her quietly. The neighborhood was almost completely dark except for distant porch lights. Evelyn pulled the blanket tighter around herself. You've been quiet lately, Michael said. She stared into the yard. You work all the time lately. The answer landed carefully. Prepared. Michael nodded slowly. That's fair. But something about the conversation felt strangely procedural. Like both of them were following familiar lines from a script neither fully believed anymore. One Sunday morning, Michael suggested breakfast near the marina. Evelyn agreed. That surprised him enough to briefly improve his mood. The diner overlooked gray winter water, where boats rocked softly against wooden docks. Older couples drank coffee near the windows. A waitress refilled mugs automatically without asking. For 20 minutes things almost felt normal. Evelyn smiled occasionally, touched his wrist once while laughing about something small. Michael felt himself relaxing despite everything. Then her phone lit up. She flipped it over instantly. Too quickly. The movement lasted maybe half a second. But Michael saw it. Saw the reflex. Saw the tension afterward. Evelyn noticed him noticing. The rest of breakfast never recovered. That night, Michael sat alone in his office pretending to review medical journals. Rain moved softly against the windows. Downstairs, Evelyn talked quietly on the phone. He couldn't hear words. Only tone. Soft. Intimate. Different. Michael stared at highlighted paragraphs without absorbing any of them. The strange thing about suspicion is how quickly it infects memory. Suddenly he found himself revisiting entire years. Work conferences, late meetings, canceled plans, business trips. Tiny moments that once felt meaningless now rearranged themselves into potential warning signs. At midnight, Evelyn came upstairs. She paused in the doorway. You coming to bed? Soon. She lingered there for a second like she wanted to say something else. Then didn't. Michael listened to her footsteps disappear down the hallway. He remained in the office another hour staring into darkness. The first real crack appeared accidentally. Michael was leaving the hospital late Thursday afternoon when he spotted Evelyn's car parked outside a downtown wine bar. Not impossible. Not even strained. Except she had told him she was in Princeton meeting a client. Michael slowed automatically. Rain streaked lightly across the windshield. The wine bar windows glowed amber against the gray afternoon. He could have driven away. Probably should have. Instead he parked half a block down. For nearly 15 minutes, he sat there feeling ridiculous. Then Evelyn appeared inside the window. Laughing. Across from a man Michael didn't recognize. Mid-40s maybe. Dark jacket. Silver watch. Comfortable posture. The kind of familiarity that arrives through repetition. Michael watched Evelyn lean forward slightly while talking. Watched her smile in a way he hadn't seen directed toward him in months. Nothing physical happened. No touching. No kiss. Objectively innocent. Yet Michael felt something inside himself go unnervingly still. Because deep down he already knew. He did not confront her immediately. That surprised him. Part of him expected rage. Instead something colder settled into place. Observation. Procedure. Like diagnosing a slow internal bleed. That night, Evelyn talked casually about Princeton traffic while reheating pasta. Michael watched her differently now. Not emotionally, clinically, the same way he evaluated unstable patients, looking for inconsistencies, compensation, signs beneath presentation. "Long day?" she asked. "Yeah, you seem tired lately." Michael almost laughed at that. Instead, he took a sip of water. "Probably am." Evelyn studied him briefly, then looked away first. That mattered. Over the next 10 days, Michael learned the man's name. Daniel Mercer. Hospital consultant. Divorced. Frequently worked with administration on restructuring projects. Michael hated how quickly the pieces started fitting together. Evelyn volunteered at hospital fundraising events twice a month. Daniel attended nearly all of them. Michael began noticing overlap everywhere once he looked. The realization hollowed him out slowly. Not explosively, quietly. One evening Michael came home and found Evelyn folding laundry in the guest room. Soft music played from her phone. For a moment he simply watched her. The familiar shape of her shoulders, the careful way she folded towels, the life they built together sitting all around them. "Can I ask you something?" he said. She looked up cautiously. "Sure." "Are you happy?" The question visibly caught her off guard. Not because of guilt, because honesty suddenly felt dangerous. "That's kind of a big question," she said lightly. Michael nodded. "Yeah." She folded another towel slowly. "I don't know," she admitted quietly. The answer hurt more than denial would have. Weeks passed. Michael continued working, saving people, delivering bad news, restarting hearts. Meanwhile, his own marriage deteriorated through tiny invisible fractures. Sometimes Evelyn became suddenly affectionate, other times emotionally unreachable for days. The inconsistency exhausted him. One Friday night, they attended a hospital fundraiser together downtown. Evelyn wore black, simple, elegant, beautiful enough that people kept stopping to speak with her. Michael watched Daniel across the ballroom, eventually drift toward them carrying whiskey. "Michael," Daniel smiled warmly. "Good to see you outside the trauma bay for once." Michael shook his hand. Firm, dry, controlled. Evelyn stood between them, holding a champagne glass too carefully. For the next several minutes Michael watched subtle things happen. Eye contact held slightly too long. Private familiarity hidden beneath professionalism. A level of comfort that shouldn't exist accidentally. And suddenly Michael understood something horrifying. They thought they were being careful. That meant this had been happening long enough to become routine. Later that night, after the fundraiser ended, Michael sat alone in the parked Volvo while rain drifted across the windshield. Evelyn remained inside saying goodbye to people. He stared at his reflection in the dark glass and realized exhaustion had transformed into certainty. Not full certainty. Enough to know the marriage he believed existed no longer did. When Evelyn finally entered the car, she smiled weakly. "You okay?" Michael started the engine. "How long have you known Daniel?" The question changed the air immediately. Evelyn looked out the passenger window. "A few months maybe." "Why? You seem close." Silence. Then carefully, "He's easy to talk to." There it was. Not confession. Not denial. A door cracking open. Michael kept both hands on the wheel. Rain whispered against the glass. "Are you sleeping with him?" Evelyn closed her eyes. That answer came before any words. When she finally spoke, her voice barely held together. "Michael," he nodded once slowly. The strange thing was how calm he suddenly felt. Not because it hurt less, because the uncertainty was finally over. Evelyn cried quietly during the drive home. Real tears, real shame. Michael believed that, but belief no longer repaired anything. Inside the house, they sat across from each other at the kitchen table while rain moved softly through darkness outside. The same kitchen where they had shared birthdays, Christmas mornings, late-night pizza, normal life. Now everything felt staged after the fact. "It wasn't supposed to happen," Evelyn whispered. Michael stared at the untouched glass of water between his hands. That sentence always fascinates me, he said quietly. She looked at him through tears. What? Nobody ever plans betrayal like a career path. It still happens anyway. Evelyn covered her face briefly. I didn't mean to hurt you. Michael almost responded immediately, then stopped, because suddenly he realized something. Intent mattered less than outcome. People accidentally destroy things every day. The destruction still exists afterward. Do you love him? He asked. The silence that followed answered before she did. Eventually, I don't know anymore. Michael nodded slowly. That honesty felt strangely more painful than lies. The separation happened quietly. No screaming, no dramatic scenes, just emotional exhaustion. Michael moved into a small condo near the hospital temporarily. Work consumed most of his days. At night, he walked along the waterfront trying to understand how two people could slowly disappear from each other while still sharing the same bed. Months later, he realized something uncomfortable. The affair itself had not destroyed the marriage. The distance arrived first. The affair simply grew where connection had already started dying. That realization didn't excuse anything, but it made the truth more complicated. One winter morning, nearly a year later, Michael stood outside the hospital watching sunrise bleed slowly over gray water. His phone buzzed. A message from Evelyn. No manipulation. No plea. Just I hope you're okay. Michael stared at the screen for a long moment, then slipped the phone back into his coat pocket. The ER doors opened behind him. Another trauma incoming. Another family waiting somewhere in panic. Another life hanging by threads. Michael inhaled the cold, salt air once before turning back toward the hospital. Toward movement. Toward noise. Toward whatever came next. Because eventually, you learn something difficult about heartbreak. You do not survive it by understanding every detail. You survive it by continuing anyway. And slowly, almost invisibly, life begins moving forward long before your heart fully agrees to follow it.